Okay. Spasiba for inviting me here to talk about irony and irony detection in social media. Yes? Okay. Right, so I work in Spain, in the Technical University of Valencia, and our research interests are mainly devoted to analyze text of social media, like trying to detect irony, or like trying to identify the profile of the writer on the basis of her writing style. And apart from other topics like plagiarism detection that don't deal too much with social media. And well, today what I will try to do to talk about irony and irony detection. And so the idea is trying to, well, first of all, okay, right. Trying to go through these topics with you in order to understand what could be the mechanism that is behind the irony, in order to try to understand how irony could be partially detected, especially focusing on social media text, as I said. So we'll be looking at some figurative language devices like not only irony, humor. There is a kind of similarity in some of the cases, but you know, irony is something that goes beyond humor, as we'll see. Then from a social media viewpoint, most of the time we are interested especially in identifying the polarity of ironic text. So we want to be able to understand if there is a polarity shift. So something could be said in an ironic way. It seems like that maybe the polarity is positive, but at the end, actually, because of irony, I mean, the review or the comment is pretty much negative, for instance. We'll have to see, to try to distinguish some differences between verbal and situational irony. Of course, we are interested especially in verbal irony in text, and we'll see the kind of text that we have been working on, and then I will share with you some news about some benchmark activities that have been organized on irony detection, and also about some projects on the same topic. And at the end, we'll try to tell you something about recent works on irony and sarcasm, recent in the sense that, well, a few papers have been published in the last 2 years. So this means that the topic is sort of interesting to the research community. So hopefully, I will be able at the end of my talk to transmit you a certain enthusiasm to work with irony detection, or at least to try to be ironic in your life. Right, so what's the difference between figurative versus natural language? So the part of this conference is on natural language. And so it's a matter of processing automatically the text and focusing on the literal meaning. Of course, a step beyond is trying to process a text also when the meaning is not literal, is figurative. So actually, what is meant is not exactly what the words say, but is something more subtle. And as you know, it's already difficult to understand if irony, for instance, is employed by when we have to communicate among us. So from an automatic viewpoint, you can imagine that is even more difficult. So some devices, apart from humor, irony, metaphor, for instance, will be focusing during the talk just on irony, even if I will try to mention some common triggers that are used not only in irony, but also in humor. Of course, focusing on irony from a text viewpoint, we don't have this further information available like facial expression or voice pitch, and that could help the hearer to detect, oh, the guy is saying something ironic. And with respect to this polarity shift, when we have to process, for instance, natural language, when we have to deal with negation, we have an explicit negation marker, for instance, not. But in case of irony, and from a perspective of sentiment analysis, we haven't this explicit marker that negates the polarity, but actually there is an implicit negation of the overall sentiment of the sentence. So it's pretty more difficult to detect it. So let's try to, to get familiar with some of the concepts. I will try to cover via some examples, and in case of ironic social media, ironic text, in our case, ironic social media text. So there is an opposition, as we already said, and then when you try to be ironic, you try to say something that is not expected by the hearer. So there is this unexpectedness factor, and there is also what is said is something that sometimes is not so logical. So there is this incongruity also aspect, and usually you are ironic, you try to be ironic intentionally, and you play with ambiguity, okay? You try to say things that can be interpreted in different ways. So we'll see if we are able to find these characteristics, incongruity, intentionality, ambiguity, unexpectedness in some of the examples we'll cover together in order to try later to understand how a preliminary approach to detect irony could be based on. So basically, the idea is to try to use the same characteristics that are employed when we try to be ironic in order to detect ironic text, okay? First of all, let's start to distinguish verbal versus situational irony. So, for instance, situational irony. Think about just a simple example, a vegetarian having a heart attack outside a McDonald's or Burger King. So something that, you know, the situation is a little bit ironic. Usually we are told that, you know, fat food of a McDonald's, Burger King is not good for your health, could produce a heart attack, and then what happens is that the situation that is somehow ironic here is that a vegetarian, I mean, actually is the one having the heart attack, and outside, I mean, a place like a McDonald's, Burger King. Right. Of course, we focus, as I said, on verbal irony, so on text, not on visual irony. This is an example of a visual situational visual irony. And so it's a kind of, but we can already see in also if, I mean, it's not a text example, but is a picture, kind of incongruity characteristics, you know? I mean, the fire brigade truck on fire, so something a little bit no sense, right? Or something that you don't expect. Right. As I said, most of the time you mean to be ironic, so it's intentional. Sometimes you are ironic even if you don't want to. So I came across to this translation 1 month ago here in Moscow, in Kursky, well, whatever I'm supposed to pronounce it, railway station. So this is an example of not intentional irony, because this is not the right translation. But I mean, most of the time we mean to be ironic, so it's intentional. Right, let's use an example. Maybe you are sort of familiar here. And so this is one more, the case of not having to deal only with the text. So in many tweets, for instance, we have the text, but we have also the image. And the image is actually, like in this case, what makes the social media text ironic. And because of, in this case, the unexpectedness factor. So we just process text, so we wouldn't be able to detect the irony in cases like this one, okay? Right, I don't have a clue. I was told that is somehow ironic, so I just copy-paste some examples in Russian, and well, the PDF version is not great, but I guess you can read it. It's about rain, I think. So August lost me, or something like this, right? Okay, some other examples. So you can already maybe try to see some of the triggers that are employed in order to try to be ironic, also in Russian. Jeez. Okay. All right. And I'm from Italy, so I like a Parmesan. And it's sort of ironic, and you can see the incongruity there, having to survive with respect to having some Parmesan. I mean, ending up in McDonald's, maybe, okay? So these are tweets written by Russians in Russia. Right, so let's move forward, showing you the kind of tweets actually we work with. We didn't work with Russian, we work with English tweets. And something I didn't mention, okay, irony is important also from a reputation viewpoint. So if you are a person, a politician, a company, you actually want to know what the people talk about what you are doing. So if people are happy about some services or products. And this is very much important because companies usually use automatic sentiment analysis tools that are able to detect, to identify if a comment, a review is positive or negative. So company could be interested in having this statistics. Okay, this percentage is, talks about, positively about what we are doing. This other percentage, not really. But usually the interest is looking at the negative comments, going through some of them manually, because some feedback can be given about what should be improved. So in case of irony, usually if, for instance, the comment is on overall negative, usually the automatic tools used to tag it as a positive. So not only percentages are wrong, but moreover, a company maybe doesn't pay attention to this negative comments that have been tagged as positive ones. So it's very much important. And here is the kind of tweets we work with. This is an example of Toyota. If you remember, a few years ago, Toyota had some problems with the brakes and the accelerators. And so you can see that some of the ways that users try to be ironic are not so straightforward to detect. Okay, maybe this one is somehow easy, at least from a human being viewpoint, to be understood. Toyota's new slogan, moving forward. This is the original one. Even if you don't want to, okay. And moving forward, yeah, because you have a faulty brakes and jam accelerator. Here, this example is somehow more interesting because you could detect a way that people play with some words in order to try to be ambiguous, in order to try to be ironic. My car broke down. No, I bought a Toyota so that it wouldn't break down. So you see the change of O into an A that makes this tweet kind of ironic. And the last one is pretty difficult to be, detected automatically. CERN recruiting engineers from Toyota for further improvements to their particle accelerator. I'm concerned. Tough. So what we started working on was focusing on the wisdom of the crowd. So, taking into account what the crowds consider as ironic. So we focus on tweets that had the irony, for instance, hashtag. And this is the first way to approach the problem. And considering them as ironic because most of the user consider so. Oh, I'm going too fast. Okay. Other kind of social media samples we work with. Maybe you have heard about this sample that ironic comments that produce a viral effect on selling, for instance, something like T-shirts and so on. So this is a case of a simple T-shirt, the mountain, 3 walls, moon, a short sleeve tee. And if you look at this case in the internet, you find out that actually ironic comments boosted, this item to be sold a lot. So there was a viral marketing effect behind. And since then, Amazon started to become interested in detecting irony in comments, right? So basically, at some point, a bored person, started, a few of them started saying, something sort of ironic, giving a 5-star review. This item has walls on it, which makes it intrinsically sweet and worth 5 stars by itself. But once I tried it on, that's when the magic happened. After checking to ensure that the shirt would properly cover my girth, I walked from my trailer to Walmart with the shirt on, and I was immediately approached by women, and so on and so forth. So people started to reply, hey, what's going on? I've been wearing this T-shirt since 1 week. I've been approached by any woman. And okay, it was kind of a joke, but at the end of the story, what was interesting from an Amazon viewpoint was that this item was sold quite a lot. This is just one of the cases. And talking about irony, you can imagine that if we try to, irony detection, if we try to approach it from a more, from a finer granularity viewpoint, trying maybe to distinguish between irony and sarcasm, or also with respect to satire, it becomes even more difficult. So even experts, linguists working with figurative language don't agree on, the definition, the distinction between irony and sarcasm. At least not all of them. So at the end, we decided to approach the problem considering, as many of them do, irony as a big umbrella, and sarcasm, for instance, a kind of irony that could be a little bit more aggressive and more punching. And the satire usually is employed with, when the comments are about politicians, and they're a little bit more, even more specific. So you have here a couple of examples. And I guess if we had to vote among all of us, it would be difficult to fully agree if the first sample is irony or sarcasm. If you find it hard to laugh at yourself, I would be happy to do it for you. And with respect to the second one, okay, you can read it yourself. And the one I wanted to be politically correct. And but maybe it's a little bit more punchy, could be considered as a sarcasm, who knows. But you see, it's pretty difficult, right? So let's start to try to distinguish, well, possibly between humor and irony. So, or say it in other words, let's try to see if humor and irony have something in common. So this is actually the way we try to approach the problem. And humor recognition, when 7 years ago, approximately, we started working on irony detection, it was a more topic that had been more covered. So we thought, okay, let's try to use some of the features that work somehow decently in order to recognize humor. And let's see if they also are useful in order to detect irony, social media. And then, if not, as actually it was the case, let's try to come up with a little bit more ambitious, even if preliminary, but a little bit more ambitious model in order to detect irony. Okay, so let's try to see if we are able to understand what is the word, or the trigger behind each one-liner that could make this one-liner sort of funny, or in some cases ironic. Of course, when we talk about figurative language, it's very subjective. What could be sort of funny for one of you could be not so funny for someone else, and with respect to irony, even more. But let's try at least. So Jesus saves, and at today's surprises, that's a miracle. What could be the trigger there? Maybe a certain ambiguity of some words. Maybe. Love is blind, but marriage is a real eye-opener. Well, here the trick could be maybe certain opposition, right? Blind, eye-opener. Drugs might lead to nowhere, but at least it's a scenic route, okay? Sometimes it's pretty difficult, but especially with respect to sort of a funny statements, funny one-liner, social media text, and so on. Certain topics are sort of the ones where jokes are made about. So this could be at least an initial trigger. Then some stereotypes, like becoming a computer programmer and never seeing the word again. My software never has bugs, it just develops random features. Here, you really need to know a little bit about the domain, computer science, in order to trying to detect as a sort of funny one-liner like this. Sex is one of the 9 reasons for reincarnation. The other 8 are unimportant. And again, you know, the kind of topic, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. No, sex and drugs, I mean, are the ones where certain jokes are. Well, not only, anyway, looking at this example, not only is, you know, humor and irony could be subjective, but are also cultural dependent, because you can imagine, I mean, in certain countries, you know, writing something about sex, and moreover, something about reincarnation, if they believe in reincarnation. So it could be not only not funny, but offensive. And I've got the body of God, unfortunately it's Buddha, again, once more. I mean, here could be offensive for Buddhists. So this is what we have seen and we have already understood. You see a certain kind of ambiguity here in the word saves, and the blind and eye opener, so antonymy, these sort of topics, sex, drugs, so human weakness, and certain kind of language that is used, the common topic, community, you know, stereotypes, and here maybe this, the one about the software and bugs and so on, is the more difficult to understand in terms of what is, you know, the trigger behind, because you really need to know more about the domain. And if we had, probably we wouldn't agree, all of us, but if we had to say what is the ironic one-liner among all these funny ones, I personally would say that just the last one could be considered as ironic. So as you can see, irony is something more than humor, so something a little bit more subtle. Some other samples in order to start understanding how, you know, the detection of humor or irony could be, I mean, somehow attacked. I'm on a 30-day diet. So far, I've lost 15 days. So if you wanted to come up with a language model in order to identify as a figurative sentence, a sentence like this one, well, what could be the trick? Okay, here the humorous, the funny effect is given by what? By the last word, days. Okay, you expect kilos maybe there. So if you try to learn from a corpus, not, I mean, humorous, I mean, a corpus like, I don't know, the standard one, British National Corpus, or a big one. So you understand, you learn the probability, given a certain sequence of words, what is the probability of coming across to the next one. So here, given the list of the words, I'm not on a 30-day, I am on a 30-day diet, so far I've lost 15. So if you have read these words, so the probability of coming across to a word like days is pretty low. And this could be a certain trigger, so that could be exploited at the time of trying to identify a situation like this. So you can think, for those who are familiar with this natural language processing stuff, you can think about maybe employing perplexity. So if you have high perplexity, okay, maybe it's a case not so common that could be then, I mean, a case of a funny or ironic statement. You see other cases where ambiguity is employed, change is inevitable except from a vending machine, okay? And the third example is pretty difficult not to understand, because I guess everybody can understand what's going on there, but to detect it. So you see that the structure of the two parts of the sentence is exactly the same. What changed is the order of the words. So children in the back seats, of course, cause accident, but accidents in the back seats, of course, cause children. So it's pretty difficult to detect these cases. We tried to do it considering the complexity of a sentence, taking into account the parts that compose the sentence, but is not so straightforward. Don't worry about what people think. They don't eat very often, so there is this position, incongruity. I feel so miserable without you. It's almost like having you here. So, I mean, position. Sometimes I need what only you can provide. You're absent. So, as you can see, I mean, this is the kind of triggers that are sort of common in some of the examples, right? So once more, in this case, if I had to distinguish between humor, funny one-liners and ironic ones, I would consider ironic, personally, just the last 3 ones. But I'm sure, I mean, not everybody would agree. And, right. With respect to the state of the art of humor recognition and generation, okay, you can read some stuff, especially the work carried out by Rada Mielce and Carlos Traparava with respect to humor recognition, with respect to humor recognition, the work by Binstead, and especially well, the 3 of them, no matter it was in the framework of the generation or the recognition of humor, they play with phonological incongruity and semantic aspects of the words. With respect to irony, sarcasm, and satire detection, not a lot had been done before. Well, maybe something more was done on a metaphor detection, especially by Tony Veal. And but the stuff that was done was based on considering similes and onomatopoeic expressions and slightly nothing more. So we understood that there was a room in order to try to approach the problem and to have some preliminary approach in order to detect irony in social media. Okay, now, so as I said at the very beginning, our first attempt was let's try to use as features in our classifier some of the features that work pretty well for recognizing humor. Let's see, I mean, if also they are sort of good in order to help detecting irony. And as we have seen already together in the example I show you, not all the sort of funny examples were ironic. So you, I guess, could start suspecting that this wasn't the ideal way. And we were also suspecting the same, but we wanted to carry out these first experiments. So we use typical features like anagrams of frequent words or sequence of words that could describe a certain situation, or anagrams of a part of speech. Of course, the polarity of words was considered. Not only so sentiment, positive, negative, but also the emotional content via the word net effect, the 6 basic emotion was considered. We, of course, took into account the ambiguities. Lexical ambiguity, we have seen many examples together before that where, certain ambiguity was making the trick. And
So basically, we try to exploit this relationship between humor and irony. And one step forward, we try also to take into account some psycholinguistic aspects, like the degree of pleasure, so the pleasantness. There is a dictionary, a Whistle dictionary, that is composed by words, and each word has three dimensions. One is how pleasant a word is, and from 1 to 3, so of course up to 3, of course word love is more pleasant than, I don't know, rain. And then imagery, so how difficult is it to have a mental picture of a word, and also activation. So from a cognitive viewpoint, how, I mean, how much, you know, the cognitive, from a cognitive viewpoint, how much a word could trigger certain emotion in our brain. So stuff that was developed by psycholinguists. So in this case, we consider only the pleasantness dimension. And basically what we did, we carry out, well, few experiments. I just mentioned one of them. We tested this model, the model that the classifier that took into account these features on the Amazon viral effect corpus we extracted from Amazon, like you know, the one of the T-shirt. And in this case, it was considered ironic not only by social media user, but also, I mean, by press, television, BBC, and many standard, not a social media newspaper and the TVs cover these cases. And without showing numbers, too many numbers, because it's otherwise it's going to be even more boring. Just to let you know that the experiments we carry out was, okay, let's see if our classifier is able to classify properly as ironic or not ironic certain reviews. So as a positive reviews, positive in the sense, I mean, ironic, I mean, this is the kind of viral effect reviews that were considered. As a negative ones, we had 3 different data sets. One was, I mean, composed of reviews of Amazon, but not viral effect reviews. Other 2 by TripAdvisor, by Slashdot, I don't remember. Anyway, what is important is that in the binary classification, the 3 cases, approximately the best results gave 60-something % of accuracy. So this means, okay, it's slightly better than flipping a coin, but it's not the right way to proceed. This is something that we expected, because as we have seen together, irony goes beyond humor. So we needed to try to come up with something a little bit more ambitious. And this in terms of features, and this is what we try to do. So basically, we consider 4 macro features: signatures, unexpectedness, style, and emotional context. And signatures that consider the way punctuation or emoticons, so typographical marks, were used. And then we consider also this, we try to consider how this polarity shift was, I mean, occur via some implicit marker, negative marker. So some adverbs like nevertheless. So you can imagine, you know, a review, okay, everything more or less positive. Nevertheless, at the end of the review, you give a negative comment that gives from an overall negative polarity at the statement. And then other temporal adverbs like suddenly, now, and so everything was going smoothly, and suddenly something happened. So this is from this point of view, the signature point of view. Unexpectedness. So as we have seen, when you try to be ironic, you try to say something that the hearer doesn't expect to hear. Otherwise, where's the irony? I mean, and so there is a certain, for instance, a certain imbalance in the context. So you are saying something in the first part of the sentence that is somehow reasonable, or I mean, from the expectedness viewpoint, and then at the end you say something that doesn't match a lot, so something that is not expected. So how to try to automatically come up with you know, a certain value in order to understanding if there is some inconsistency, I mean, some imbalance from the first part and the second part of the sentence. There are measures like the semantic relateness ones. For those who are familiar, many of them are implementing the Ted Pedersen webpage. So it's a matter of calculating if there is a certain semantic relateness between the two parts. Style, well, the intuition there was, okay, maybe there is a common style somehow in trying to be ironic, especially because this style could be imposed by the social medium that is used. You can imagine if you write in Twitter, if you wanted to be ironic in Twitter, you are imposed to use as a maximum 140 characters. So, I mean, you have to play in a limited space, right? So this was our intuition, so we use a sequence of characters that work pretty well in other tasks like author profiling, for instance, and or like authorship attribution in general. Then we allowed, we consider skip n-grams, so we allowed also, well, in this case, a sequence of words, but let's see if a certain sequence of words, certain patterns are used more than once in the example that are considered as ironic, for instance, in Twitter. But let's try to be a little bit more flexible, not exactly the same sequence, but maybe the same sequence, but one word, so let's skip one. And then the intuition was not all the cases, but the majority of the cases, there is, you know, an ironic statement is negative, not always, but it's negative. So maybe there is a certain sequence of sentiments, positive, negative, positive, negative, that could be somehow a common pattern among the ironic samples. And last but not least, if we pretended to be ironic, we wanted to play a little bit with emotions, the emotions of the hearer. So we wanted to take into account the emotional context. And as I said before, we did it considering the three, in this case also the activation imagery dimension, plus the third one, pleasantness, of the Whistle dictionary I was talking before. So just some example, activation, imaginary pleasantness. So each word, as I said, let's consider imagery, as a certain values. Yesterday, I mean, given by this psycholinguistics, official, first day, spring, food, snow, ground, and so on. And so we try to see if given, I mean, all the positive samples, the ones that were considered as ironic, and the negative one, the ones not ironic, if there was behind a certain threshold, I mean, some common trends in, I mean, considering these three aspects. Okay. Right. And actually, considering this more complete features, I mean, we were able, considering the four micro category in both a balance and imbalance scenario of exactly the same the same, more or less, quantity of ironic tweets or non-ironic tweets, we were able to obtain 75, approximately, a little bit higher of accuracy, right? If you are interested in knowing more about the topic, of course, you can contact me, or you can have a look at some of the papers we have published in the last 4 days. The idea, the last 4 days, yes, I need more sleep, the last 4 years, the last, actually 2 years, I need more sleep. And so actually the plan is not talking about our work, but just to show you that this is a topic that recently is quite, sort of active in the research in the natural language, figurative language research field. So I would like at least to mention some of the works, okay? So I will go quickly through some of the works published in the last year, the last 2 years, not days, years. Okay, first of all, saying something about some competition, okay. The first one, I think that nobody here would be interested in participating, first of all, because the evaluation period is going on now. Secondly, because it's in Italian, so I guess it's not the right audience. And so in the framework of a sentiment analysis task, there is a pilot task on irony detection was organized this year at the Valita challenge. But what could be interesting for you, at least, to know that next year Semeval will have a task on sentiment analysis of figurative language in Twitter. And so basically we focus on tweets that were ironic, sarcastic, without distinguishing between the two, so we consider both, and also metaphoric. And the idea, in order to make the task a little bit more challenging, was not just saying that is already a challenge itself, given a tweet, say if it is positive, negative, or neutral. But the value actually go from a -5 to +5, so there is, the possibility of 11 scores from a sentiment analysis viewpoint. And actually, if you have a look at the web page, the trial and the training samples are already available. So approximately 9,000 tweets have been tagged already. And with respect to these 11 values possibilities. And soon, in 1 month, 1.5 months, the training should be available. Then there is an interest in many countries on working on irony detection. So it's kind of interesting to know that in the States, for instance, they are interested in detecting irony. And the Army Research Office has a project on automating irony detection. And this was something that was covered in the news, and I found out, and it seems to be true, Secret Services seeks a Twitter sarcasm detector. Okay, something more serious than this one maybe. And so it was covered by BBC, and it was a sort of already ironic, seeing that, Washington Post, in the URL had here, well, the news was in June. The Secret Service wants a software that detects social media sarcasm. Yes, sure, it will work. So already sarcasm in there. So anyway, just to let you know that the Army Research Office is working on irony detection in the States. So tweets like this one should be detected in the future as ironic, no problem. Right, so maybe in a quarter of an hour I will go quite quickly saying about the very last works on irony, sarcasm detection, in order to let you know that, moreover, this topic is covered not only from computational linguists, but also from linguists, from psycholinguists. So it's a kind of interesting topic, considered as interesting topic by many of our colleagues in different fields. So. Right. For instance, here they try to, well, in this last year publication, they try to see to consider bloggers, males and females from North America, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and basically they were interested in, to see what was the mechanism employed in order to try to be ironic. So they find out, they are linguists, they found out that the hyperbole was the ironic form and most frequently used by bloggers, and especially in sarcasm. So when you exaggerate a lot, this is what happens. From a computational linguist viewpoint, if you read the paper, if you read also the statements like interannotator agreement for identifying that the utterance was ironic is nearly 90%, you could be a little bit, I don't know, you could look at this in an ironic way if you want. But basically what they did, the linguists, they just randomly selected 25% of the blogs, and then they tried to commonly agree, discuss if it was the case. So it's not, as you know, the way we usually do from a computational linguist viewpoint. So we ask independently, for instance, to annotators to say if certain text is ironic or not. And then in case of disagreement, you ask to a third one. So we don't ask the two to agree one way or the other, otherwise too easy. And then, yes, with respect to the kind of irony even higher, this is from a computational viewpoint too high to be, to be not ironic. But anyway, this is a kind of interesting work for linguists. Then there is always this attempt to distinguishing from a finer granularity viewpoint between irony and sarcasm. This is another work based on Twitter. So basically, at the end, the common approach is consider irony as an umbrella and the sarcasm a specific kind of irony. And what was also covered in this work, the cognitive aspect and the creativity aspect. So as you see, very interdisciplinary aspect were covered. What maybe just to highlight and to relate to what it was said before, the interest was focusing on sentiment words, so seeing if somehow more positive than versus negative words were used in irony or in sarcasm, and what they found out was something that was somehow expected. More positive words were used in tweets that were sarcastic, because they had this aggressive intention, and so positive words. Instead, irony tweets use less positive words, more kind of a neutral sentiment words. Okay, let's move. Then, yeah, well, related to this, and this was published in EMNLP last year, well, when there is this attempt of how the positive sentiment, is used in a sarcastic, so in a negative situation. So what the authors try to see is if there was somehow a common pattern in the use of positive words in sarcasm or in some of the sentences. So they focus on cases like, look, like this one. I love being ignored. So, okay, after positive verbs like love, adore, or I don't remember, actually I didn't understand, but more or less I was told that example in Russian about August loves me, so it's kind of similar. And so they focus on the sequence of words, so word n-grams that come after words like this, in order to see how a positive sentiment word, like love, adore, could be related to a negative activity, being ignored, is late, and so on. Right, and let's skip details. I talked too much already. And anyway, they use a bootstrapping approach, and they were able to achieve a precision around over 70%. Then this is the work of Horacio Saguion. Maybe some of you know him, and a PhD student doing the PhD under his supervision. So they try to model irony in Twitter and also sarcasm, as we'll see later. Basically, they consider majority of the features that, together with my former PhD student, Antonio Reyes, we use ourselves, and they carry out the same kind of experiments using a decision tree that gave us the best results, considering the corpus, the Twitter corpus with the 4 category: education, humor, irony, and politics, on top of the previous features. They consider some others, like a frequency of words that are common versus not so common, and intensity of adverbs and adjectives. And they consider some resources for that, not so interested in going into detail. Basically, they obtain the same results, okay, slightly better, but not statistically significant. And with respect to the, the graphs, one of the few graphs I show you, so approximately the same kind of results, 75% of accuracy, and of ironic tweets versus politics category, ironics, humor, ironics, education. They try to do the same with sarcastic tweets. So they collected some sarcastic tweets as well, and they tried to discriminate them with respect to education, humor, irony, newspaper, and politics tweet category. And as you can imagine, it's not it's straightforward. The worst results in terms of affirmation in this case were obtaining when they tried to distinguish between sarcastic and ironic tweets. So this once more shows us that it's not so easy to approach the problem from a finer granularity viewpoint, right? This is a work of Felipe Cimiano, so another well-known colleagues in our area that recently also started working on trying to approach irony detection in product reviews. And basically, they try to, to understand a little bit more to a deeper level the linguistic properties of ironic and sarcastic text from a linguistic phenomena viewpoint. And they consider a pretty complete bunch of features, and they carry out some experiments on a corpus from Amazon that was released a couple of years ago, LREC by Filatova. And so they basically consider, features like, well, we already mentioned some of them, hyperbole, imbalance in terms of overall polarity of words in the review versus the star rating. We have also seen this in the viral effect T-shirt example. So, sometimes there is a match, sometimes there isn't a match between the stars, the number of stars that are given in the review, and the polarity of the words that are used, and so on and so forth. I mean, many other pretty interesting features from a linguistic viewpoint. Like words that are just positive, negative, but end with exclamation marks. So also the punctuation marks could make this polarity swift trick, and so on and so forth. So they employ a bunch of a classifier, and they obtain a measure, approximately 0.74 with the logistic regression. So no matter the corpora are different, so the values are not really comparable. But as you can see, this seems to be a kind of actual results. I mean, so a lot of space for improvement. So what we and the other colleagues are trying to do is just to approaching the problem, but a lot of room is here for improvement. So plenty of staff for PhD students working on this topic. And the best results were obtained considering this star rating and bag of words. So it's once more, as we already partially saw before, there is this kind of a correlation between the way the user use stars in the review and the words, the polarity of the words that are in the review itself. Okay, now. Then this work was carried out by linguists, Attardo and a colleague in Spain, and so not really focus on irony in social media, but on irony in general. And actually, as I said at the very beginning, we are more interested because it's more common as a kind of irony, of the negative irony in which, the polarity is actually not positive but negative. But there are cases in which irony could be positive or even neutral. Are not so common, but it could happen. And just an example. Okay, you are familiar with the negative one? Yeah, you are certainly my best friend ever. Okay, this is sort of easy to understand. The positive kind of irony is more difficult. They give an example of, the son, Daniel, coming back home from school and showing his report pretty good with, all of A, and showing these reports to his father, and the father replying in an ironic way. Daniel, I'm really worried. Your grades are terrible. And this is a kind of a positive, irony. But it's not so common. Usually, it's used more in the negative, from a negative perspective. Even less common, and to a certain extent more difficult to understand, I think, for many of us, is are neutral irony examples, like this one. The letter is longer than usual because I didn't have the time to make it shorter. Okay, well, this is considered as neutral irony. It's not maybe so interesting because not so common in comments in social media about reviews and products, but it exists. And actually, they were interested in seeing if user could distinguish no problem between negative positive or negative neutral, neutral positive. And this is what they did. They designed a questionnaire, both in English and in Spanish, in order to identify irony polarity. So there were 20 situations. They asked 38 speakers of English and 56 of Spanish if they could distinguish. They could tag themselves as ironic, sarcastic, polite, impolite, aggressive, and also, positive, negative, and neutral. And actually, it seems that the majority the cases this happened, no problem. So they say that the positive and neutral irony are not significantly harder to identify than negative one. Right. Other works may be less interesting also about dialogues, not only about social media text, but sarcasm, irony in general is considered pretty interesting also in online dialogues. Okay, but it's not so interesting. Let's skip. We're a bit late. And another work at LREC trying to understand what is the impact of sarcasm on sentiment analysis. So I mentioned before that from an automatic viewpoint, the polarity classification tools usually, have some kind of problems when irony or sarcasm is employed. And so they actually focus on the irony. Well, before we have seen an example in the Washington Post of the irony employed in the URL. They focus on the irony employed in the hashtags. So basically, they try to tokenize hashtags and to see irony, well, sarcasm, to see if it was possible to detect the sarcasm in hashtags themselves. Recently, just last month, I attended the call-in, and I will skip the details, but it's also in other languages like Czech. Sarcasm and irony are addressed in Chinese. I think that nobody or nearly nobody here will be able to understand. The tricks that in Chinese, so we'll skip. But just to mention that every time more, this is a kind of topic that is covered in many languages, and because of the need to at least having a preliminary idea of the identification of ironic and sarcastic tweets. And last 5 minutes, just to mention a work that we carry out ourselves recently. We present in a workshop of LREC. Trying, it's a very preliminary work, but there is some attempt already trying to link irony with emotions. So trying to see what are the emotions that if there is a certain correlation in ironic tweets with respect to one of the basic emotions, for instance, and also gender. So we work in Facebook, in Spanish, and so basically we had 3 annotators, and we asked the annotators to tag the comments with respect to ironic or no ironic. Of course, we knew about the gender of the writer, and also we asked the 3 annotators to detect the comments with respect to the 6 basic emotions. So it's a very preliminary work, and so some kind of too small corpus, but you can see already pretty worrying. Not a proportion between what some annotators, well, concretely the second annotator, consider as ironic some of the comments. So 3 or 4 times more than the other 2. So, as you can see, it's very subjective. Considering something as ironic, very subjective. Then when we consider as, in between quotes, gold standard as ironic comments, so on the basis of what 2 out of 3 annotators consider as ironic, you see that in total, just 4% of the overall corpus was considered as ironic. It's more, makes more sense. And then, we focus on comments on about three categories: football, politics, celebrities. And okay, the corpus, as I said, is pretty small, but well, the category that seems to have a more ironic comments is the one about politics. Okay, the comments were in Spanish, and they were about the Spanish political situation, so pretty easy to be ironic if some scandal is going on. And in this corpus, at least, males seem to be a little bit more ironic than females, but it's too small, and it's just for fun saying these things, nothing serious, really. The very low agreement was obtained, so this shows you how everything is very subjective. Just in case someone knows Spanish and wants to play with this corpus is available, and you can work with it. And we were also interested in seeing if there was some correlation between some of the 6 basic emotions and the ironic comments, but not really. We didn't find any. So to be explored further. And I think that my youngest fellow said that is enough. She made me understand it already. So I will stop here. Spasiba for your attention. If you have any question, I would be glad to try to answer. Thank you.
Could I, since I have a microphone here magically, can I please ask a question, and then I will give it to somebody else? My question is, did you or maybe somebody else tried amount of retweets and number of retweets as a predictor? Because I can expect if it's funny, people want to retweet it and to share it. Is it possible to use this feature as predictor?
Yes, you are right. And actually, we didn't, as far as I know, nobody did it so far. But in some way, well, we didn't do it, so the answer is no. But in some way, the same idea was considered when we extracted the viral effect comments in Amazon. So those comments that, in this case, weren't retweeted, but were considered, were commented back and were considered as ironic by newspapers and so on. Yeah, so it's the same idea is behind, but we didn't do it in Twitter. So yes, it could make sense, and actually it should be done, at least tried. If you don't have a question, you can try to be ironic, to say something sort of funny, and no problem.
People use like language features, which may be more difficult than some structured feature from number of, I don't know, like something like structure.
Yeah, probably you're right. Not only content, but also structure could be employed. And right, yes, good suggestion.
Thanks. My name is Pavel, and the question is that you mentioned that you tag words with multidimensional descriptors, like describing each word with several dimensions.
Not me. Psycholinguistics did.
Yeah.
I used this information from the Whistle dictionary.
Okay, but anyway, how do you form the final fixed length feature vector for the regular pattern classifier? Do you build some kind of histogram for the passage, or you do some averaging of these features which describe different parts of the sentence? Thank you.
Yeah, I briefly mentioned it, but I see I wasn't so clear. And so basically, I don't remember the exact numbers, but the idea it was to consider this on the basis of the training samples. After a certain the information that we were able to get in the training samples, so to consider this after a certain threshold. And I don't remember the exact values. The information is one of the 4 papers that were published in the last 2 years, and not days, as I said. But yes, the idea is this one. Well, what I would like to say, just to make sure to clarify it, that okay, something has been done, not only by ourselves, by also some of our colleagues, but no matter some kind of decent publication, it's a preliminary approach. The problem is difficult, as you can imagine. But even if just a small percentage of these ironic comments and reviews could be detected, this could be beneficial anyway as a starting point to the companies, at least companies, and for instance, at least saying, watch out, because these comments seem to, be somehow ironic, sarcastic, so maybe they are negative, or at least, making this knowing the personnel who manually try to understand more from the negative comments. So, this is something that should be improved, and a lot of space for improvement. And hopefully the Semeval next year competition will help to move forward in the field. So I hope that someone of you could be interested in participating, or at least to do something in irony detection and well, humor recognition as well, but especially in irony detection in Russian, because as far as I know, nothing has been done so far. So it's really, an open field to be explored. And I guess many companies would get the benefits of having even a preliminary approach to the problem in Russian text in social media, but it's something to move forward. Who is going to make
I just
your
wanted
daughter
to ask,
or you?
Is there something good enough at irony detection to be commercially applied?
If is there something already?
Something good enough to be commercially applied?
Well, first of all, as far as I know, there isn't anything that has been, there isn't any tool that automatically try to identify irony. And first of all, probably because it's not good enough. But maybe the right approach would be not to pretend, if we wanted to think in trying to make available a tool for, in order to commercialize it. The right approach would be not to pretend to discriminate positive, negative, in case of ironic, sarcastic comments, but at least to have, another category like quite likely sarcastic or ironic, in order to let the personnel of a company know that maybe these comments should be investigated, should have a look at them manually. Because when irony or sarcasm are employed, most of the time a lot of information is in there. And so it's important not to miss this information in order to improve products and services. So maybe something semi-automatic like this could be the right way to try to make work in a product like this in a real scenario.
Thank you.
My name is Sergey. Thank you, Paolo, for this very interesting talk. Yeah, humor is a very interesting material, very subtle material to work with. And yeah, what some people find funny may not be funny for other people. And in your work, do you consider for cultural differences, for example, well, in Russia, we don't do it in the back seat of cars, not as much as in the US. Or you've gathered all the statistics on how different people perceive humor. So what would you say, how much of humor is in the language? I mean, how much of it is in the play of words? And how much is embodied in situation, for example, like in a car seat example? Thank you.
So thanks. This is a kind of question I am asked many times. And my kind of answers are, yes, kind of answers. Because how can we have tried to come up with statistics, for instance, on the use of, humorous comments or ironic ones? If you base, let's focus, for instance, on Twitter. We could base on some hashtags. I consider then, the percentage of these hashtags with respect to, all the tweets. This could be a way, but in many cases, this is, very subjective, as you can imagine. So when we try to come up, like for the competition, with a gold standard, we ask at least two annotators. In our case, due to the 11 possibility in the score, we ask, if I'm not wrong, to seven annotators to annotate, and in order to have, a gold standard, a certain agreement between a majority of them. But I'm pretty sure if we had asked to other 7 people, we wouldn't come up with the same agreement. So it's difficult to come up with statistics that could be accepted or could be completely meaningful. What maybe could make sense to have an approximately idea on the basis, for instance, of the hashtags that are employed in irony, sarcasm, or also metaphor with respect to, so how many are the tweets that employ these hashtags with respect to, the whole tweets in a language, and maybe to see if things change among languages. But of course, a tweet that doesn't employ the irony or the sarcasm hashtag could be ironic as well. So it's just in order to have a grosso modo, approximation. I don't have actually a better, a good idea how to.
Well, you've had all those examples of how you classify humor. Like there's the factor of unexpectedness, or using certain language, or situational humor. So, do you have any statistics on how? What factors are the most frequently used in humor?
Yeah. Concrete statistics, no, because once more, but it's a very interesting question. Maybe, yes, it could be answered trying to, ask some annotators to tag those. Let's say tweets that were considered as ironic, if the trigger that was employed dealt with unexpectedness or ambiguity, or it has not been done. But most of the cases, yes, you need to say something that is not expected. So I would say unexpectedness and incongruity also, and ambiguity, but I wouldn't be able to give specific statistics. This is a good question. Maybe as a future work, I'll try to cover these aspects with
some
Okay, no
students or
problem.
colleagues. Thank you.
Can you repeat how much agreement in humans was there in the gold standards? Did you say 7 out of 11?
Agreement in what corpus?
Well, say English.
Yeah, but in some of the works, the recent works I show, I don't know exactly to what corpus do you refer. So the one of the corpus of the last works I just show, or the agreement of the corpus we use in order to carry out the experiments on Twitter. What exactly?
I'm asking, when human annotators are annotating your corpus, when they're marking a sentence as either ironic or not, how much of an agreement was there between annotators? How many people have tagged something as ironic and other haven't?
Okay, so I mean, you see, I mean, what is, okay, this was in Spanish, so we had an annotator that tagged as ironic more than 3 times the number of comments in Facebook. And before I show you, well, in the corpus we work ourselves the irony, the hashtag irony corpus in Twitter. We base ourselves on the hashtag. So actually we didn't do any agreement. We didn't employ any annotations among annotators. We just rely on what the crowds, the people in Twitter consider as ironic. But there are other works like the work, but this is too much, the work of some linguists that have a different approach. So they consider, in case of disagreement, they try to agree themselves. So I mean, 90%, but this is not realistic, because if we don't agree, the two of us, and we discuss till one at the end says, okay, white flag, I agree with you, is ironic. I think that is not the right way. So as you can see, so to try to answer your question, as you can see, there are there is a certain diversity in approaches, or relying simply on the hashtag, let's consider it's ironic, and or relying on what was considered as ironic by medias because of the viral effect, like the Amazon corpus. Okay, there are cases that are not really computational based, like the linguist one, that okay, they keep on discussing till they reach an agreement. What will be interesting, but we didn't have time to do it yet, so I mean, this question will be addressed, and even at a finer granularity viewpoint. What will be interesting to calculate this agreement in the 11-point scale of sentiments that will be using for the SEMEVAL 2015 competition. So it it's not done yet. It will be done, and the agreement will be pretty low, especially because so the higher is the number of the annotators, the lower is the agreement, especially if the scale is not just a positive, negative, or neutral. So if you have 11 possibility from a -5 to +5, and if you have seven annotators, the agreement is pretty low. And so it's something that we need to do it, and it will be done. And this is the only thing I can tell you. It will be done because it was already under work, and And the feeling, looking at the overall value of the sentiment, the feeling is that is pretty low because of the high number of annotations.
Yeah, that only proves the point that humor is a
I'm sorry, I need to interrupt you because we are out of time for now. We can have one small question. I think it was in the middle of the hall.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Nikolai. I want to ask one little question. The previous was about technical side on how do you conduct experiment. My question is overall. I didn't quite get how do we get to the problem, or why do we need to detect irony? Well, for instance, I myself, I can't say I'm very good in detecting irony, and I'm sure that pretty much most of people don't do it very well. So what's the point in teaching a computer to detect irony that I won't be able to detect?
Okay.
That's pretty much.
Right. Don't worry, I have many colleagues of mine in my department that are pretty bad in detecting irony. And actually, this is good because I can tell them whatever I feel like, and then I can say, no, but it was ironic. I mean, so. Then don't worry, because soon the states will solve this problem. So you'll have the sarcasm detector by the Army Research Office and the Secret Service, so no problem. No, more seriously, yes, it's a fact, it's difficult to detect irony. And it's difficult, and from human beings, so even more from an automatic viewpoint. So I try to say that it's a little bit pretentious and ambitious to come here saying, oh, okay, no problem, we are pretty good in detecting irony from an automatic viewpoint, and so results are pretty good, and the problem is nearly solved. No. I mean, we, and when I say we, all the colleagues working in this area, try to start approaching this problem. And why I'm a little bit more scared about that it wasn't clear why this could be important. Thinking not about my colleagues, but about, for instance, a company. So when you are a bigger company, you receive a lot of comments, posts, tweets, and so on about the product and the services you offer. When you are a politician, and again, a lot of comments. I mean, talking about a company could be, I mean, it's very much interesting saying, oh, we are doing pretty well. Majority of people seem to be happy with this new product, or we are not doing so well. So if the amount of reviews that the company receives is too big, this cannot be done on a daily basis manually. So it has to be done, you need to have some statistic from an automatic viewpoint. So at least saying, okay, well, majority seems to be sort of happy, and minority not, or vice versa. But what happens if irony, sarcasm, and so on is employed? That the commercial tool that determine the sentiment, positive, negative, or neutral, is a fact. Today is sunny, okay, it's a fact, neutral. I mean, they usually don't work very well, okay? So it's a matter of trying, of course it's difficult, but trying to at least being able to detect some of the cases that employ irony in order not to let them be automatically classified, for instance, as a positive. Saying, oh, at least saying, oh, these are ironic. So, I mean, if you wanted to have a look if actually they talk about positively or negative about this service, this product, it's better if you do it manually, not automatically, because they don't seem to be positive. And from my experience, for some collaboration with some local enterprises in Spain, actually companies are interested in having a look not to all, but some of the negative comments. And in order to understand why they, I mean, some people didn't like the last model of, the mobile or whatever. So having this possibility of saying, oh, okay, these potentially are negative, for instance, negative comments is already beneficial from a company viewpoint. Of course, the problem is difficult. Of course, just a small number of comments that are ironic will be identified as so, but it's something. So I hope at least to have been able to make understand that it's an important problem for companies, for instance. Then, okay, it's difficult, and it's just, these are just the first steps in order to move forward. So it's difficult, but it's important.
Okay, thank you very much.
Спасибо.